Yes guys, welcome back to another 2025 video. Really excited for this one. Today we are going to look at how Xavier Lindsay, pick 11 in the 2024 National Draft, fits into the Melbourne lineup in this 2025 season. I think there's a really good opportunity here for Lindsay to take a particular position. I think his flexibility as a player really awards him some freedom here and the opportunity to go into a really nice position, a position that a lot of young players in recent years have really thrived in. So we'll get into that in a second. The sponsor of today's video, who I must mention here, is Video Pro, and they are offering all of the listeners of these videos to go down and use a code to get $30 off purchases. Now, Video Pro, they specialize in all kinds of electronics, your home theater systems, all of your kind of projectors and things like that, and audio that goes with that makes watching footy really enjoyable. They have all of that home entertainment stuff taken care of, and as I said in the previous video, all at the lowest possible prices. So go and get yourself an absolute bargain. Use one of those Video Pro discounts that I have down there in the description section, and you'll be able to get yourself a really good deal. And don't forget that they also have all of this kind of production stuff here that I use in my videos, cameras and lighting and all of those things as well. So check out Video Pro. We will move on with the video. We've got to discuss, I think firstly, probably where Melbourne are as a team at the moment. They win the flag in 2021, and ever since there, I think there is perhaps a little bit of complacency that's sort of fallen over Melbourne in the last couple of years. I think there's potentially you could say there's a little bit of arrogance with the way that they've sort of behaved. I think they've had a lot of criticism thrown at them throughout that period. And I think there's been a level of the communication, at least, that comes out of Melbourne, that there's been an expectation that they're just going to turn it around, and it's never really happened. And they've never really been able to gain control. I think when they did win their premiership, they did it off a lot of quality around the ball, a lot of centre clearance dominance through the likes of Christian Petrarca, Max Gawn, Clayton Oliver, and Jack Viney as well. So they did it off the back of that. Even if you go back to that grand final that they were runaway winners in the end, they did it off a lot of their centre bounce work. They didn't really have that. I mean, they had a good defence. They had a good key defensive unit players that could win back the ball intercept, but they didn't really ever have those elite sort of half-back flanker players. They didn't really have an elite forward line, but they were able to sort of manufacture it and manufacture that dominance around the ball, play a really forward half game where they could make it stoppage heavy, continue to win those stoppages to progress the ball up the ground. But I think we've seen, particularly in that 2024 season, we saw a shift in what they were trying to do. And we also saw a willingness to try to get younger players into the team. We saw Caleb Windsor slot in there. We saw Trent Rivers move from that half-back position into a midfield role as well. So they're definitely trying things. And this is where I think Xavier Lindsay has a really good opportunity. I think for most of the other younger players, and we'll probably touch on Harvey Langford a little bit, but the midfield still does look pretty strong, and particularly with players like Trent Rivers who have gone into there, and you still do have your Clayton Olivers and your Christian Petrarcas there, your Jack Viney's still there, and your Sparrow and players like that. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get inside with all of that quality in there. But I think Xavier Lindsay has a really big opportunity to not only come in and take one of those half-back sort of ball movement roles that Melbourne will have on offer in 2025, but to also really improve Melbourne's overall profile. I sort of touched on there that they tried to play a bit more of a ball movement game. They tried to move away from this sort of this game style where they try to bludgeon teams with inside 50s. As I said, those repeat stoppages that just sort of continue to put pressure on the opposition defences. But I think there's an inherent sort of conservatism to that approach, I think, and they sort of got found out over the last couple of years that they weren't able to sort of take that handbrake off and really move the ball freely. So I think that is something that they're going to try to get into their game, try to master a little bit more, where they can have a little bit more opportunity to not only score goals from the back half, but also to be able to control the ball. If we go through Melbourne from a statistical point of view, they really struggle with scores from the back half. So that's that sort of, swift ball movement that teams like St Kilda execute really well, that Sydney execute really well, that Collingwood executed really well in their premiership year as well. Melbourne haven't really been able to master that, and they also haven't been able to master that uncontested possession game. Something that we've seen over the last few years that has become really important at stopping opposition momentum run-ons. When the other team starts to get their game going, they start to get on top, the crowd gets involved. Melbourne haven't been able to, just get a foothold in the game, get hold of the ball, and maybe just take some possession for a little while. That we've seen that you don't want to get too swamped down with those sorts of game styles because they can be it can be difficult. You look at a team like Freo who does love to play that uncontested possession game, and sometimes they struggle to move the ball. Melbourne haven't necessarily had that problem, but they haven't been able to arrest some of those momentum swings against them. So if you look at the Melbourne back six, you've got a really good core there of key defenders. They're going to be able to move someone like Petty back, who played as a key position forward a lot in 2024. He'll go back to team up with Stephen May and Jake Lever, who are, of course, aging, but they're still really, really high in key defenders. And that's never been a problem of Melbourne, to be able to win the ball back off the opposition. But they don't really have that killer off half back. They don't have that player that takes a lot of meters, progresses the ball, and ultimately can get you involved in that ball movement game from half back. You think about what happened to Collingwood in 2024, where they moved Nick Dacos from the half back position into a midfield role, and they just really struggled to be able to score from the back half in 2024. And I think a little bit that's what's happened with Melbourne. You've seen Angus Brayshaw, the early retirement, that's been a huge knock from not only their midfield stock overall, but also what he was able to do from a half-back perspective. Christian Salem just doesn't seem to have been able to get back to his best. I mean, he is a beautiful kick of the footy, but inconsistency in performance. The beginning of 2024, you go back, they tried to move him into a midfield role to give them a bit more dynamism inside. That didn't really work, and then they shifted him back behind the ball. I don't think he had that much of an impact, and I still think they need at least one more piece into that sort of attacking halfback option, and Xavier Lindsay is the perfect player to come in. So I've talked for 6-7 minutes in this video, and I haven't really talked exactly what I want to do. I think Xavier Lindsay can go into one of those positions. I think you've got players like Christian Salem, like Jake Bowie, that can kind of help him out a little bit and be a little bit more defensively minded. You've already got a really experienced, strong key position defensive back six with May and Lever and those types of players. So he can be pretty freewheeling. And as I mentioned, Nick Dacos, Harry Sheezel, those guys that have gone into halfback roles have excelled in their first seasons. And it's a really nice way for smaller bodied, younger players to get a bit of a look at the AFL and just have a bit of free time in their early rounds and get them a little bit of confidence as they come into the league. Now, one thing that Xavier Lindsay is really good at in his top age year was ball progression. Whether he was playing for the Gippy Power, mostly as a midfielder there, he got a lot of metres gained at that level, but in the national championships is where he really showed that up. He played a little bit across half-back, a little bit as a wingman, and a little bit inside, and he was number 2 in the entire national championships as a ball mover. He's got a beautiful left foot kick. He's someone that, with that movement that he's got and that really nice agility that he's got, he can play that half-back position. He can sort of turn on a sixpence, and then he can hit those diagonal kicks that teams really need to not just continuously go up the line, and that's something that Melbourne have been stuck with a little bit. And of course it's a strategy because they have a player like Max Gawn that they can target, but I think for them to be able to change direction and just become a little bit less predictable as they have been is really important, and Xavier Lindsay can do that really well. Now, another thing that Lindsay was praised with throughout his top age year was some of his big game performances. And in particular, if you go back to some of the video footage of the Melbourne recruiters talking about Lindsay, they were so impressed with what they called the best game of junior football that they'd seen in 5 or so years, which was the Vic Country versus Vic Metro game. Xavier Lindsay was the best player on the park that day. So they love his competitiveness, they love his movement, and they know that he's going to be able to come into this level of competition and have an impact straight away. And I think that that is going to be best from the halfback position. Now, I think the only thing that we really need to touch on here and what could potentially derail this for Xavier Lindsay is that MCL injury that he had in probably mid to late season for the Gippsland Power. Now, how much that's going to set back his pre-season and how much that's going to put this plan on ice a little bit. Like, can he get back? Can he get enough of a preseason in so that he can get that position and then kind of keep hold of it for the rest of the year? But we know with these movements to key players like Trent Rivers and the retirement of Angus Brayshaw, there is absolutely a position there for Xavier Lindsay at halfback. And I think with the qualities that he has, again, that amazing kick that he has and ball progression that he has, I think he's just absolutely primed to be able to play this role. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Xavier Lindsay can come into a halfback role and do a bit of a Harry Sheezel, do a bit of a Nick Dacos, or do you think at this stage he just needs a little bit more time to play in the VFL before he gets an opportunity? Let me know in the comments below, guys, and I will see you next time.